Very good morning. We are live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India, India's voice to the world. I'm Abhishek Mahajan. Coming up in the next hour. Residents in the US state of Florida ordered to evacuate with Hurricane Idalia due to make a landfall today. Chandrayaan-3 rover confirms the presence of sulphur and oxygen on the moon's south pole. After landing in the moon, ISRO now has its sights on the sun, with agency preparing for launch on Saturday. US vows to back Ukraine in its war with Russia as it announces a new $250 million military aid. Russia foils drone attack done by Ukraine. Cricket Asia Cup 2023 is set to kick off today with the clash between Pakistan and Nepal. Residents in Florida are preparing for the worst, with Hurricane Idalia due to make landfall today. Nearly three-quarters of the state's counties are under a state of emergency, with its governor urging people to heed warnings. DD India's Kate Fisher reports from Washington, D.C.
Millions of Americans are being warned to prepare for major flooding and high winds as Hurricane Idalia barrels towards Florida's west coast. Forecasters are predicting storm surges of more than 3.5 meters. Here in Washington, the White House says that President Biden is being briefed on developments by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA. The agency's director has said that the storm, and I quote, will be deadly if people don't get out of harm's way and take it seriously. She urged people living in the path of potential storm surge to evacuate, but emphasized that they didn't need to travel too far to get out of its way. To help the evacuation process, Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis said that highway tolls were being waived, shelters were opening, and that hotels were prepared to take evacuees. He also said that 5,000 National Guardsmen and 580 search and rescue workers were mobilized, more than 1,000 generators were prepped for deployment, and 200 ambulances were ready to sweep into the affected area when feasible. He added that contingencies were in place for after the storm passed through, including more than 30,000 utility workers to repair outages and a reserve of 400,000 gallons of fuel. Now, Idalia is expected to make landfall on the Gulf Coast on Wednesday morning local time in one of the most rural and poorest areas of the state, an area that hasn't experienced a major hurricane since the 1800s. Although much of Florida, including the densely populated Tampa area, is forecast to be affected by severe weather. Kate Fisher in Washington reporting for DD India.
And India's lunar mission Chandrayaan-3 has confirmed the presence of sulphur on the moon's surface. The Pragyan rover has also detected signs of aluminium, oxygen, calcium and iron, and the hunt for hydrogen is underway. India's space agency said yesterday that the rover had been rerouted safely after encountering a 4-meter crater on the lunar surface. And India's historic lunar mission has garnered worldwide interest, but it turns out Chandrayaan-3's success has been a global effort too. A remote part of southwest England has provided some cutting-edge technology that's playing a very important role. Our reporter John Beaver got a rare behind-the-scenes look at the satellite Earth station, helping to keep mission under control.
7,000 kilometers from India is an array of equipment communicating with objects much further away. The Goonhilly Satellite Earth Station spent a large part of its early life dedicated to broadcasting TV signals. In 1969, it helped transmit pictures of the moon landing to enthralled viewers. 44 years later, it's playing its own part in the next chapter of lunar exploration as one of the sites keeping engineers on Earth in touch with the historic Indian mission.
During the landing phase of Chandrayaan-3, we were preparing to take over for the next phase on the surface. So we had both the excitement of seeing the landing happen, but on the other hand, is calmly going through all of the processes that we need to do to make sure that we don't do anything wrong and everything's going to go according to plan.
Goonhilly is part of a space industry that employs almost 50,000 people in the UK. The country is second only to the United States in terms of the number of satellites it produces, and the site here helps engineers keep in touch with many of them. The largest antenna here is 32 metres in diameter. It needs to be that big to send and receive signals to deep space. As well as the Indian lunar mission, they're also using this antenna to talk to the European Space Agency's Mars Express mission, 225 million kilometres away. The technology here is compatible with space agencies around the world. It's an industry dominated by big players, but as the only private company in the world offering these communication services, the team here are excited about the possibilities being opened up by India's celestial achievements.
So if space missions do cost billions and tens of billions, that's going to restrict and limit the reality of what you can do in space. So we need that paradigm shift. We need what India is doing, and we need what Goonhilly is doing in order for us to continue to expand that exploration. So it's a really important model shift here that needs to happen.
As the price of getting to space comes down, those involved will keep looking up to the stars and think this could be the beginning of a new chapter in space exploration. John Beaver at the Goonhilly Satellite Earth Station, reporting for DD India.
And after a successful lunar landing, ISRO now has its sights on the sun. The space agency shared images of the launch vehicle carrying spacecraft Aditya L1 to the second launch pad. The solar launch is now preparing for takeoff on Saturday, just before midday Indian Standard Time. ISRO says the launch will be the first Indian mission to study the sun. A Pakistani court has suspended former Prime Minister Imran Khan's recent conviction on corruption charges. However, this will not lead to his release as a judge has ordered his detention in another case. Let's take a look.
A Pakistani court has suspended former Prime Minister Imran Khan's recent conviction on corruption charges. But the decision will not lead to his release, as a judge has ordered his detention in another case on charges of leaking state secrets. His lawyer, Naeem Panjutta, announced the news on social media on Tuesday, saying the sentence has been suspended. 70-year-old former cricket hero Khan has been at the center of political turmoil since his ouster in a parliamentary vote of confidence in April 2022. His relations with Pakistan's powerful generals have deteriorated ever since. Khan was imprisoned on August 5th. He'd been sentenced to 3 years in jail for unlawfully selling state gifts during his tenure as Prime Minister from 2018 to 2022. His legal team had lodged an appeal on the grounds that he was convicted without being given the right to defend himself. As a result of the conviction, and with a national election expected soon, Pakistan's Election Commission has also barred Khan from contesting elections for 5 years. The remaining charge against Khan alleges he made public the contents of a confidential cable sent by Pakistan's ambassador to the United States and used it for political gain. Khan says the cable proves his removal was at the behest of the United States, which he said pressed Pakistan's military to topple his government because he had visited Russia shortly before its attack on Ukraine. Both the United States and the Pakistani military deny this.
The Nasdaq led gains on Wall Street on Tuesday as investors bought the dip in tech stocks. Meta, Apple and Tesla all saw strong sales following a disappointing month for the sector. DD India's Nick Harper reports.
The Nasdaq rocketed more than 1.5% in Tuesday's session as traders rallied around tech companies snapping up shares at lower prices after several weeks of declines. It was a good day for some of those big tech companies. Like Apple, it was up 2.2%, Meta rose 2.7%, while Tesla jumped almost 7.7%. On the economic data front, consumer sentiment figures were a little softer than expected, while job openings showed a drop in available listings last month, in what appears to be a sign that the US economy is cooling, and interest rate rises are having an effect to slow the labour market. So the Dow closed the day up 0.9%, the S&P increased 1.5%, and the Nasdaq finished 1.7% higher. Despite the gains on Tuesday though, and during Monday's trading session, all three indexes are still on track for monthly losses of around 2.5% to 3%. Cryptocurrencies also got a boost on Tuesday, that after the US Court of Appeals ruled that the Securities and Exchange Commission was incorrect in denying investment company Grayscale permission to create an exchange-traded fund, or ETF. It may lead to the SEC giving approval to other Bitcoin ETF applications. So Bitcoin jumped around 7.5% following the news, while Ethereum was up around 5%. Nick Harper in Washington, reporting for DD India.
And US Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo is wrapping up a 4-day visit to China, where the trip widely thought to be an opportunity to mend ties between the two countries. The White House is hoping to address Beijing's reluctance to engage in meaningful initiatives and American business concerns over investing in China. All right. DD India's Andrew Wood is with us. He is joining us from Hong Kong. In fact, he has joined. Good morning, Andrew, here from India, New Delhi. What do we expect on the last day of the visit, and what has happened so far from Sunday?
Well, the tone started off quite friendly, I think, on the first couple of days of the visit. There was a lot of talk about initiatives, exchanging information, even the announcement of a tourist summit next year for tourist leaders, tourist industry leaders in China and the US. But the tone turned a little bit, I think, frostier last night when Gina Raimondo said that American businesses had told her that China was becoming what she called uninvestable. American firms don't want to do business in China if they can help it. They say that there are fines being laid on American companies with no real rationality. They say they're worried about a new, tougher espionage law, which, as well as being tougher, is also a lot vaguer. And they worry that this means that when they're doing their ordinary business of research and so on into, say, market research or taking over another company, that they could be considered to be spying. And in fact, there have been some American-led consultancy firms who've been prosecuted for such things and have basically given up and left China.
And also, I mean, US-China economic ties hanging in the balance. I mean, what does the visit mean for US-China relations? I mean, some positive statements have come out of the visit.
Yes, some positive statements, and don't forget that Gina Raimondo is the fourth senior American politician to visit China in the past couple of months, including people like the Secretary of State Antony Blinken and the Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. And she was actually invited by the Chinese rather than suggesting that it might be a good idea as she visited. So, you know, there is this attempt to try to improve relations, but there's still, you know, there's such a lack of understanding over, I think, over things like restrictions on technology exports from America to China, and that they still will probably be at loggerheads over that. And the Commerce Department, which Ms. Raimondo heads, is in charge of implementing those restrictions. Still, it's probably better for them to be talking than not talking at the moment. It's the last day of the trip. Last night, Ms. Raimondo went from Beijing to Shanghai on a high-speed train, and she'll be leaving later today.
Last day, you said, of the 4-day visit, and some important statements have come out, positive statements, like you mentioned, But what is the reaction of China on this? What is China saying about the talks?
Well, so far at the beginning, China was quite friendly. Then I think things got a little bit tighter, as it were, more focused perhaps yesterday after Ms. Raimondo met the Premier of China, and he said that it was good for America and China to have better relations. I haven't seen any reaction yet to Ms. Raimondo's statement that American companies were finding China uninvestable, but I'm sure the Chinese will want to say something about that.
All right, Andrew, keep tracking this. Thanks for the time being appreciated. With the visit hoping to ease tensions between the US and China, one major area of contention is still semiconductor chips, which have become the lifeblood of the global economy. DD India's Tony Waterman has more.
Decided we're going to invest in America.
It's not just a campaign slogan. During his presidency, Joe Biden has helped funnel tens of billions of dollars into U.S. tech manufacturing. But he's also expanded a Trump-era tactic of control, enacting sweeping tech restrictions on the U.S.'s biggest rival, China. Chinese companies now need a license to buy advanced semiconductor chips and chip-making equipment from the U.S. Washington has also convinced Japan and the Netherlands to do the same. Then, in August, he signed an executive order limiting U.S. investments in certain Chinese technology, including semiconductors, quantum technology, and artificial intelligence.
We're continuing to make progress in fixing the supply chain. For example, we couldn't access semiconductors during the pandemic because the factories making them overseas were shut down. You all know semiconductors are those little small computer chips about the size of any of a fingertip that affect nearly everything in our lives.
The White House says the restrictions will protect national security and ensure American technology isn't used to boost China's military development. But Beijing sees it differently, calling the moves economic coercion and an attempt to stifle China's rapid technological growth. It has retaliated by banning certain sales by U.S. chip maker Micron.
The truth lies somewhere in between.
Economic strategist David Goldman says there's truth in both arguments, but warns that U.S. restrictions could backfire, since the Chinese are already proficient producers of highly sought-after older chips, used in everything from toasters to air conditioners.
If the Chinese are able to flood the market with cheap chips, they will cut down the profitability of Western chip makers, and the Chinese government seems willing to make substantial subsidies to its chip industry, as indeed we are, and that could lead gradually to Chinese dominance in the industry and very hard times for American chip makers.
Instead, Goldman says the U.S. should be laser-focused on boosting investment in research and development, especially in basic science, something that has faltered in recent years.
I very much want to stay ahead of China. I want the United States to be the dominant technological power, but I don't think that suppressing other countries' technological development is a viable long-term strategy. I'm not even sure if it's a viable short-term strategy.
U.S. and Chinese officials this week agreed to start exchanging information on export controls to help avoid, American officials said, misunderstandings. But one topic that won't be up for negotiations, matters of national security, leaving the U.S.-China chip war to loom over the delicate relationship between the world's superpowers. Tony Waterman in Austin, Texas, reporting for DD India.
All right, we'll take a short break, but still to come on DD India News Hour, EU defense ministers gather for informal talks in Toledo in Spain. London Mayor Sadiq Khan says clean air is a right, not a privilege, as the city's ultra-low emission zone expanded. US vows to back Ukraine in its war with Russia as it announces further $250 million military assistance package for the country.
Sulphur.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News. I'm Abhishek Mahajan. EU defense ministers have gathered for informal talks in Toledo in Spain. DD India's Alex Kadir is in Brussels and sent this report.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine is once again top of the agenda for European defense ministers, as it has been at every meeting since February of last year. They're meeting in an old weapons factory in Toledo, Spain, a fitting place to discuss the kind of support Kyiv will need in the coming months. In the last week alone, the plan to deliver F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine started to take shape. The country's defense minister says they could be operational as soon as spring 2024. The plan is being spearheaded by the Netherlands and Denmark, who are leading a coalition of countries who will train Ukrainian pilots over the next 6 months. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he expects to receive around 40 aircraft, which the Dutch and Danish air forces have recently retired. The EU ministers will also discuss the situation in Niger. Just over a month after the country's military toppled the democratically elected president, the EU is still concerned about what the coup could mean for stability in the region. Ministers will want to address what the situation means for the migration deal the EU had struck with Niger and how vital uranium imports could be affected. Finally, the EU's defense representatives will meet with their counterparts from the United Nations and NATO in a bid to further strengthen their cooperation on regional and global security issues. Above all, though, this meeting's primary focus will be on Europe's support for Ukraine in the face of Russia's attempted invasion. That means monitoring the current counter-offensive on the ground, but also planning what weapons, training and equipment Kyiv will need in the months and years to come. Alex Kadir in Brussels, reporting for DD India.
Now, the US has vowed to back Ukraine in its war with Russia as it announced a further $250 million military assistance package for the country. The Pentagon says the new package includes additional air defense and artillery munitions, mine-clearing equipment and medical vehicles. The new package also includes over 3 million rounds of small arms ammunition. Over $43 billion in US military aid has been provided to Ukraine since it began its war with Russia. President Joe Biden earlier this month asked Congress to approve an additional $24 billion in assistance.
Today, the Biden-Harris administration is announcing a new package of security assistance for Ukraine to meet Ukraine's critical security and defense needs. It includes additional mine-clearing equipment, missiles for air defense, ammunition for artillery and HIMARS systems, and over 3 million rounds of small arms ammunition. This package will help Ukrainian forces on the battlefield and support its air defenses. The United States and our allies and partners will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes.
Now, a drone attack on the city of Pskov in northwestern Russia has damaged 4 heavy transport planes. A video showed smoke and fire rising from a distance after the huge explosion. However, no injuries were reported. Russian media says 4 transport planes were damaged at the military airfield. The local governor says the local military was repelling the attack. Ukraine has not confirmed its involvement. Now, Russian mercenary boss Yevgeny Prigozhin has been buried 6 days after the unexplained plane crash killed him. Secrecy surrounding the funeral of the Wagner Group founder means the memorial was kept private. Here's more.
Yevgeny Prigozhin, the Russian mercenary leader, was buried in St. Petersburg on Tuesday, 6 days after the unexplained private jet crash that is believed to have killed him. And secrecy surrounding the arrangements for the closed funeral meant it could not be turned into a large-scale show of support for the man whose massive mutiny in June amounted to the largest ever threat to President Vladimir Putin's rule. Putin did not attend the ceremony, according to the Kremlin. Reuters cameras briefly captured this footage from the cemetery, which was under heavy security, before 2 unidentified mourners ordered them to stop recording. Russian authorities have not said why the plane crashed, and the Kremlin has rejected speculation that Putin ordered Prigozhin's death over the mutiny as a, quote, absolute lie. Villagers living near the crash site told Reuters at the time that they heard a loud bang before seeing the plane fall. The plane model had a good safety record and only one incident in 2 decades of flying, which was not related to mechanical issues.
Справедливость и счастье.
This is the last known video of Prigozhin, said to have been filmed in Africa and released just days before the incident. The crash killed him and other top members of his private military company, Wagner Group, along with the plane's crew. It's not clear what will happen to the group now, which appears to be leaderless.
Now, the US has suggested the Kremlin could be behind the mysterious death of Wagner mercenary group chief Yevgeny Prigozhin. He was declared dead by the Russian authorities in a suspicious plane crash last week. Speaking at the daily White House press briefing, Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said, "We all know that the Kremlin has a long history of killing opponents." She went on to say it's very clear what happened here. It's the closest the US has come to accusing Russian President Vladimir Putin of directing the killing of Prigozhin. Now, prominent Russian nationalist Igor Girkin, who fiercely criticized the way that Russia has conducted the war in Ukraine, has failed in an appeal against his pre-trial detention on charges of inciting extremism. Here's more.
Russian nationalist Igor Girkin lost an appeal on Tuesday against his pre-trial detention on charges of inciting extremism, a Moscow court said. Girkin, also known as Strelkov, has fiercely criticized the way Russia has conducted the war in Ukraine. And his case is being closely watched as an indication of how far the Kremlin will tolerate aggressive criticism of the conflict in Ukraine. Girkin's lawyer said he considered the ruling to be, quote, unfounded and unlawful. Miroslava Rijinskaya is Girkin's wife.
I think that the court ruling is unjust. We will be appealing the court ruling. I still hope that on the 18th, my husband will go home.
The court also confirmed an earlier ruling to remand Girkin in custody until September 18th. He is best known in the West for having been convicted by a Dutch court over the shooting down of a Malaysian passenger plane over eastern Ukraine in 2014. 298 lives were lost. He has denied he was involved. Girkin is a former officer of Russia's FSB security service who organized pro-Russian militias to fight Ukrainian government forces in eastern Ukraine in 2014. His lawyer told Reuters last month that the case against him was based on something Girkin had written on the messaging app Telegram in May. Girkin had complained that authorities in the Russian-controlled part of Ukraine's Donetsk region had failed for 3 months to provide support payments to families of men called up to fight against Ukraine. Girkin posted that, quote, to have someone shot for such a thing would be too little. His lawyer told Reuters that Girkin admitted writing the post, but did not agree that it amounted to extremism or incitement. The 52-year-old faces up to 5 years in prison if convicted.
All right, we'll slip into another short break, but still to come on DD India News are floods in New York's Times Square station after a water main burst. An area bigger than New York City has been destroyed during wildfires in Greece. And the 80th Venice Film Festival is set to begin today.
Wherever news breaks, whatever it takes.
Connecting corners, cutting across continents.
Stories that matter from across the globe.
Accurate, authentic journalism that serves you right. From politics to glamour, from sports to world affairs, with a fusion of aesthetics and substance. Introducing news in a new avatar. Experience the world through a new lens. Stay tuned to DD India for an exciting journey beyond.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News. I'm Abhishek Mahajan. And the viewers who have just tuned in, recap of what we have done so far. Residents in the US state of Florida ordered to evacuate with Hurricane Idalia due to make landfall today. The US has announced a further $250 million in military aid for Ukraine. Meanwhile, a drone attack on the Russian city of Pskov has damaged 4 heavy transport planes. And Cricket Asia Cup 2023 is set to kick off today with a clash between Pakistan and Nepal. London Mayor Sadiq Khan says clean air is a right, not a privilege, as the city's ultra-low emission zone is expanded this week. The scheme has sparked small protests, with opponents saying it's been introduced too quickly and disproportionately affects poorer residents. DD India correspondent Julia Chapman reports.
All 32 London boroughs now fall under the ultra-low emission zone, meaning drivers of older, more polluting cars need to pay a charge in order to enter that area. This is a scheme that was first introduced in central London in 2019 in order to bring down pollution levels in the British capital. Since then, it has expanded twice. It now encompasses the entire area of Greater London, but it's not been without its controversy. There are many very vocal opponents to ULEZ, many of whom say that it is simply too quick to be bringing out this expansion of the ULEZ zone. Many as well objecting to the cost, saying this is a time where there are huge cost of living pressures on London residents, and this is simply an inappropriate time to put this additional burden on them. But the London mayor says that 9 out of 10 cars are already ULEZ compliant in the capital, so it will be a relatively low number of people affected. And there are also incentives for those with more polluting non-compliant cars to scrap those vehicles and buy new ones. Each of them are eligible for around £2,000 or $2,500 in order to do that. Now, some say that's simply not going to be enough for a brand new car, but that is the incentive that is being offered in order to get pollution levels down, which the London Mayor Sadiq Khan says is necessary because there are some 4,000 premature deaths in the capital every year that are directly linked to air pollution. Julia Chapman in London, reporting for DD India.
And 2 young Venezuelans are trying to raise awareness about climate change by turning single-use plastics into valuables. In their workshop, they give a second life to products that have been thrown away or abandoned. DD India correspondent Mary Trinimina brings us this story.
One man's trash is another man's treasure, says an old proverb. But here at NEO Workshop in Venezuela, nothing is considered waste. 2 young entrepreneurs came up with the idea of turning single-use plastics into valuables. But first, all bins and bottles must be cleaned, sorted, and categorized.
We're now creating and enjoying the process of seeing materials that are waste and thinking, how can we transform them? How can we take that something that's finished its useful cycle and be able to give it a second life and turning it into an object with more value than it initially had?
4 months ago, they began making flower pots by recycling plastic containers. Each pot is unique and different since the color pattern changes in the production of each piece. 18 years old Luisandro Leon is in charge of feeding the plastic into a shredder, which will break it down into much smaller pieces. The workshop processes plastic type 2 and 5, which are commonly used as food containers and plastic bottles. Then, an injection molding machine helps to melt the plastic and turn it into the final product.
When a person drinks a soft drink, throws that away, and that ruins the environment. Here, what we can do is to take that waste and reuse it to make new things.
In Venezuela, only 5% of the garbage thrown away is recycled, according to unofficial estimates. It is not mandatory for citizens to separate solids, plastic or glass waste at home. NEOS welcomes individual donations and buys recycled plastic as well. Here at the workshop, every bottle cap, plastic container, or even all discarded movies are transformed into a new world full of possibilities. The goal is to create both quality and useful objects. NEOS founders are currently testing new products, including eyeglasses frames made from 100% recycled materials. All products are sold online. The idea is to expand to a clothing and footwear line in the coming months.
In many places, we have seen the impact of pollution with images of garbage islands floating in the oceans. But with these projects, we can directly or indirectly attack these types of issues.
A sustainable and environmentally friendly business that hopes to make a profit, but also help the planet. In Caracas, Maritrini Mena reporting for DD India.
A wildfire burning in northeastern Greece for 11 days has destroyed an area larger than New York City. Has more.
Fire burning in northeastern Greece for 11 days has destroyed an area larger than New York City. That's according to the European Union-backed Copernicus Climate Change Service on Tuesday. Fueled by gale force winds and hot weather, the fire that began near the city of Alexandroupolis quickly spread across the Evros region. It killed at least 20 people last week, making it Europe's deadliest blaze this summer. A European Commission spokesperson outlined the body's relief efforts.
So most notably in Greece's Alexandroupolis region, we are facing the largest wildfire ever recorded in the EU. In this context, we have mobilized 12 aircraft from our rescue fleet, together with over 400 firefighters and 60 vehicles.
Aircraft and hundreds of firefighters from Serbia, Slovakia, the Czech Republic and Albania are battling the flames. This is Czech commander Jiří Nemčík.
It's very difficult according to the temperature, wind and size or the space where the fire is. So it's on 100 meters and the development of the fire is very dynamic, so it's very dangerous.
The flames have turned swathes of lush greenery into scorched earth and destroyed homes and livelihoods. The Copernicus Emergency Management Service said the fire had raged over 310 square miles at least, and New York City takes up 300.5 square miles. All but one of the dead are presumed to have been migrants who crossed over from Turkey. Authorities fear more bodies may be found when the flames are put out, as Evros is a popular crossing into the EU for thousands of migrants and refugees each year. Summer wildfires are common in Greece, but the government says extreme weather conditions, which scientists linked to climate change, have made them worse this year.
All right, now let's take a look at other stories making news around the world. Heavy rain leaves a trail of destruction in various parts of Bolivia. Mudslides due to relentless rain claim 3 lives and leave several trapped. Search efforts continue to rescue the survivors. Part of Times Square station in New York turned into a waterfall after a century-old water main broke in the station and sent water pouring through the ceiling. The world's oldest film festival opens today amidst anticipations of no show due to ongoing Hollywood actors' strike. As the festival marks its 80th anniversary, many debutant directors will compete for the prestigious Golden Lion Award. The event will conclude on September 9th. 5 major late-night television hosts, Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, Seth Meyers and John Oliver, are uniting on a podcast called Strike Force 5 to chat about Hollywood's ongoing labor disputes. The podcast is a group effort by the presenters to raise funds for their striking staff writers. Spotify said Strike Force 5 will be available on most major podcast platforms and run for at least 12 episodes. All proceeds will go to the writers of the late night shows.
I hope there is no strike. I support my riders, but we have a lot of staff and crew that will be affected by this, but they got to get a fair deal. So, I'll do whatever I can to support them, and hopefully there is no strike and they can figure out a deal.
Mexico's Navy has seized 4 tons of cocaine from a boat at the Pacific Ocean after chasing the smugglers. During the 2 separate operations in the Pacific Ocean, the Navy also found 5,200 liters of fuel and detained 11 people. All right, time now for another short break, but still to come on DD India News Hour. The Cricket Asia Cup is set to kick off today with a clash between Pakistan and Nepal. Former US Open champion Andy Murray has earned his 200th major win.
Turning crisis into opportunity, transforming ideas into action, stories of real change, tales of sustainable solution. This series is going to tell stories of such changemakers. Watch Changemakers on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Abhishek Mahajan. Chinese smartphone maker Xiaomi reported a 4% revenue drop in the second quarter, tracking a shrinkage in China's handset market. However, it says its move into making electric vehicles is running ahead of the schedule.
Smartphone maker Xiaomi saw a 4% drop in revenue in the second quarter. It followed a shrinkage in China's handset market as sales dropped to $9.2 billion. That was down from $9.6 billion a year before, but did beat analyst estimates. Net income rose 147% from a year earlier and also beat forecasts. The Chinese firm put that down to cost-cutting and improved efficiency, particularly in physical stores. But Xiaomi couldn't escape a fall in consumer demand for China's smartphone market. A leading consultancy that tracks the industry said overall shipments fell 5% to 64.3 million units in the second quarter. Xiaomi's shipments dropped by just under a fifth to 8.6 million. There was a particularly big drop-off in overseas market India, where shipments fell 22% to 5.4 million units, according to analysts. As handset sales slip, Xiaomi has plans to diversify. It aims to manufacture electric vehicles and has received approval from China's state planner. The company has pledged a $10 billion investment over a decade in the auto business. Xiaomi said Tuesday it's ahead of schedule. It further said it plans to start mass production of EVs in the first half of 2024.
And the US government has unveiled its list of 10 costly prescription drugs that will be subject to the first ever price negotiations by Medicare. The 10 drugs that will be discussed include blood thinners, diabetes and heart medication, as well as a blood cancer drug. If the program is successful, the process will begin again in February next year, when Medicare will choose 15 more drugs for negotiations. US President Joe Biden says the negotiations will save patients money, but the new prices won't come into effect until 2026.
Reducing the cost of these 10 additional drugs alone will help more than 9 million Americans.
All right, time now for some sporting action. We'll start with cricket. Cricket Asia Cup 2023 is set to kick off today with a clash between Pakistan and Nepal. The tournament will be co-hosted by Pakistan and Sri Lanka. The Asia Cup sees Pakistan and Nepal placed in Group A alongside India. It's a high-stakes scenario with one team's journey ending after the initial round, and the big-ticket match between India and Pakistan will be played on 2nd September. Tennis now. The fourth and final Grand Slam tournament of the year, US Open, has entered into the second round. Former US Open champion Andy Murray earned his 200th major win when he overcame Frenchman Corentin Moutet 6-2, 7-5, 6-3 to reach the second round in New York. And Poland's Hubert Hurkacz overhauled Swiss Marc-Andrea Huesler in 5 sets, 4-6, 5-7, 7-6, 6-3, 6-1. Hubert Hurkacz will play Jack Draper in the next round. Now Fulham has thrashed Tottenham Hotspur 5-3 on penalties to reach the third round of the League Cup after they drew 1-1. Tottenham defender Davinson Sanchez failed to find the net with their third penalty as Fulham keeper Marek Rodek saved low to his left before Fulham's João Palhinha and Kenny Tete both scored to complete the victory. And two-time US Open champion Venus Williams suffered her most lopsided loss in 24 appearances at the Grand Slam tournament with a 6-1, 6-1 defeat at the hands of qualifier Greet Minnen in the first round on Tuesday. The German smacked 24 winners and saved all 6 break points she faced to dispatch the veteran American, who she reversed. Now, police in the northeastern Brazil killed 2 men suspected of involvement in the murder of 9 people case. Violence and crimes like these have recently escalated in the region. The alleged perpetrators were located by security forces in a forested area of the city. The authorities are still investigating what sparked the massacre. Alright, that's all for this edition of DD India News Hour. But let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Abhishek Mahajan. From all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India News Hour.